All right. Well, with that, I think we can go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. My name is Leah Walker. I'm the FREML president this year, and we're so excited to have you all join us for our first virtual meeting, the quote-unquote new normal for now. I hope everyone's having a great Tuesday so far, and we're changing it up a little bit. Normally we do introductions, but just due to the nature of this virtual meeting, we're not doing that this time. So with that, I'm going to pass the torch to Renee to introduce our speakers. But before we do that, I just want to remind everyone, as Micah and Robin are talking with us this morning, please put your questions into the chat box so we can ask those at the end. We want you to get as much information from this as possible, and we will build in time at the end for questions. So with that, Renee, take it away.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody. I have the pleasure of introducing our speakers, and I've actually worked with both of them, which is surprising. Very small world that we're in. So I will introduce Robin Miller first. So Robin Miller is the Executive Director of the Arts and Culture Alliance. And also joining us is Micah George, who is the Vice President of Development and Communications at Maryhurst. So I will read their bios because I think that's what I'm supposed to do. And keep in mind, this is only my second meeting as the program chair, so I'm just sort of still guessing. But we'll start with Robin. Robin Miller is the president of Nest Community Marketing, a graduate of Washington, D.C.'s The American University with a BA in Communications and a minor in Educational Studies. Robin launched her career in the public sector in D.C. Her first professional post was with the National American Federation of Teachers, a teachers union where she and a colleague led the public advocacy efforts around a national campaign to raise the standards of achievement and conduct in public schools. For 20 years, Robin worked within the public education, social service, and business association sectors, having worked as an education director, a director of brand advancement, an executive director, and a vice president for fundraising. Past organizations include the Louisville Bar Association, the Advertising Federation of Louisville, the Kentucky Science Center, and the Home of the Innocents. Putting her love for collaboration, the big picture, strategic thinking, and organizational growth together, Robin founded Nest Community Marketing in 2014 to help nonprofits, small businesses, and entrepreneurs hatch their next big idea through 3 service areas: marketing migration, nonprofit navigation, and strategy on the fly. Professionally, she was peer selected as the National Executive Director of the Year for the American Advertising Federation in 2009. Personally, Robin is also a steadfast and career volunteer as her daughter's former Girl Scout leader, the former PTO president, and the planning officer for her homeowners association, as well as a board member for the Carnegie Center for Art and History and the president of the National Association of Women Business Owners. So welcome, Robin. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. You didn't have to read that whole thing, Renee, but thank you.
I know. I'm like, all right,
you can skip mine.
All right. Micah George is a 12-year nonprofit veteran, having held external relations roles for organizations in London, New York, and his hometown of Louisville, Kentucky. He currently leads the external relations team for Maryhurst, the oldest child welfare agency in Kentucky. Micah and his wife Fiona have 2 young kids, 4 years old and 2 months old. And when he actually has free time, he loves running, yoga, cooking, and enjoying a good craft beer with friends. Micah sits on the boards of the Louisville Youth Philanthropy Council, Jewish Family and Career Services, and is a member of the Senior Leader Council for the Alliance for Strong Families and Communities, an influential national member network of human-serving agencies. So welcome, Micah. Thank you for joining us this morning. So I guess to start off, we were hoping each of you could kind of give us a state of the nonprofit industry. So Robin, if you want to get started kind of talking from the arts perspective, and then Micah will have you talk from kind of more of the social service perspective.
This seems like an early morning topic where you really need some bourbon. It's too early for that. I'm just joking. It's thank you first of all for having me here today. I'm excited to be with y'all and see so many familiar faces. It's always good to run into some old people, old friends that you know, or well, young people, but people you've known a long time, I should say. I should correct myself. But anyway, thanks for having me here. You know, it's a really different world right this moment, and it was a very different world very quickly. And so I have spent the past with all of my different clients, Arts and Cultural Alliance specifically, but all of them combined for the past 4 weeks now, I guess, just really being really reactive and focusing a lot on advocacy, trying to figure out what is the right messaging, what's the right context to say things, how, you know, obviously being sensitive, all of those kinds of things. And the state of affairs is actually in some ways very innovative right now. I'm excited because we're being able to have conversations that I think all of us on the staff level have been wanting to have with our boards, where we've been wanting to try some new things. And I think that we're in that place right now where innovation is happening. And on one hand, that's the positive. The challenging part, obviously, is fundraising within this environment or getting the story out in all the right ways in this environment. And obviously, specifically for the arts and culture sector, we are losing an economic impact of $1.3 million a day. So we have been doing a lot from an ACA, I'm going to call it ACA from now for the rest of the presentation, it's easier to say. But within the sector, it's everybody's closed. And we've been doing surveys where we're identifying that furloughs are happening, layoffs are happening, and it's a scary place for many of our small and big institutions that we really rely so heavily on to make the quality of life that Louisville has been known to love. So we are working very closely with the Fund for the Arts. So the Fund for the Arts is also my client in the same way that Arts and Cultural Alliance is my client. I run the Cultural Pass program in the summer as well with this role. And we've just been spending every single day for the past 3 weeks straight looking at ways to find recovery money, stimulus money, relief money, what Micah was talking about, the PPP money and the EIDL money that's available out there, EIDL, all the things that are available, the stimulus monies. And so we've been just focusing the conversation every single day around that and how to help our member organizations identify that funding and have access to that funding. So conversations from the SBA to other alliances that are forming in terms of getting new recovery funds around. You may have seen late last week, that the Fund for the Arts has changed their entire model, not their model, but their entire focus on their $10 million campaign to be a recovery fund as opposed to the regular monies that are raised. So it's an interesting time for sure.
All right, Micah?
Sure. State of affairs. So I can really speak more around, the human serving sector. And, what I think right now is the economic downturn of our time. And with a lot of families, a lot of communities really struggling, and we're really at the tip of the iceberg. I think that what we're seeing right now is that we're just starting to see this really highlighting a lot of the systemic challenges that human serving organizations are facing from a solvency and sustainability perspective. There's been a ton of research done that a lot of people, unfortunately, really just have ignored around nonprofits' ability to retain cash, to fundraise beyond their annual operating budget, to build not only endowments, but just reserves for rainy days. There's tons of national data and a lot of even local data. And this was the thing that I believe is going to really tip the scale with regards to us having to figure out systemic, wise, how can we build a better support network for children and families who are really vulnerable in our communities? And so I think that we're just starting to see the repercussions. We got our first month of data. So we work with kids in the foster system, for example. We got our first month of data from March. And, there's a huge influx in kids that are having to taken out of their homes. And I think, I know Leah knows this, when kids are not in routines with school, when families are dealing with added stress, when you have so many families who are living paycheck to paycheck, and right now there's just so much uncertainty, a lot of bad things can happen in communities that don't have. And so I think we're going to be seeing a lot of that rear its ugly head over the next, well, for a long time. I can't give a few. So, I think the state of affairs is that this is really highlighting these systemic challenges. Something that I've seen, from a fundraising perspective, I've been really pleased with some of the reaction from our funding community, in particular institutional donors. I think if this had happened 20 years ago, especially with foundations, I think the reaction would have been much, much different. I've seen a lot of movement with regards to foundations seeing themselves working in partnership with nonprofits as opposed to sort of more of a servant relationship, which is much more of a traditional kind of thing. Nonprofits sort of beg, that kind of thing. But I've really liked, both from a national, regional, and local foundation perspective, I've really appreciated the interest in foundations to truly understand where our pain points are as nonprofits, how they can support us, and being really generous with their support so far. And I think we've just started to see that support come to fruition. And so I think that's a silver lining that's come out of this, is that, there's been a ton of movement, a lot of work being done behind the scenes to truly build better, more sustainable bridges with foundations and institutional donors in particular. I really like that. There's so much technology. It's like we all opened our eyes and we're like, oh, yeah, it's like Zoom and all this really neat stuff. Microsoft Teams has been an epiphany for me. I'm really hopeful that, again, looking at it from a silver lining perspective, that this is something that nonprofits start to really embrace. I know, there are some nonprofits that have embraced this, newer nonprofits that have a little bit more flexibility and nimbleness that have been founded. We're 180 years almost. And so it takes us a while to get used to technology, but I've been so impressed with our willingness to, because of just sheer need. If we want to continue serving our population, we have to embrace technology. And we've moved quicker onto online platforms because of some great, like the Office for Medicaid and the state has really loosened a ton of restrictions on telehealth and stuff like that. That's part of it. But we just see a need, and we've really, not just we as Maryhurst, but we as a community have really filled that opportunity. And I truly hope that we can continue that momentum, because that's where the world is going toward, healthcare in particular. And we consider ourselves to be a healthcare provider, as do many of you, I think. And so I'm really hopeful that this momentum we've been able to establish with some technology is going to be sustained and supported by our funding communities and our state and federal legislatures as well.
Okay, great. Thanks, guys. Very quickly, I do want to remind everybody of the chat box feature. If you have questions that you would like to ask either Micah or Robin or both, please feel free to use the chat box, and we are monitoring that, so we will ask those questions in real time. I don't think there's any right now. No, just a hi, Micah and Robin. All right, so
Nicole,
really getting into the meat of it, how are you stewarding donors right now? So many of us are used to doing our one-on-one meetings. We're used to having our phone calls. We're used to having our events. Where are we going with that? How are you stewarding donors right now? How do you see us, stewarding donors in the future? Do you see any of that changing, or what's been your experience so far?
Yeah, I'll start. We can just keep tag teaming Micah if you want to do it that way. So from the arts and cultural perspective, I think what arts and cultural sector does the best is keep people uplifted. It's an inspirational sector that we reside in. And so we've been taking the strategy of just reminding people that the arts and culture institutions are still here. We're still operating. And so we're operating in a very virtual way. So all of our organizations, we have about 80 different members, are doing some sort of virtual programming or some sort of virtual connection with their member base, their donor base, and their overall constituents. For example, the Fraser History Museum is every single day putting out an amazing virtual museum every morning. They have the beauty of having Andy Trinan and Rachel Platt, both of whom are from the media world. So they're used to producing a news story every single day. But that's a great example of how somebody is being proactive, staying on brand, and connecting to their donors. So that the idea is, even though while we're dark, everything's closed, the theaters are dark, the museums are dark, when it comes back open, people should still have a fond feeling of what's been going on with all of our organizations. We're also telling the real story, though, of the impacts, the economic impact that's coming as a result of this. We spent a lot of time writing some white papers so that we could tell people the actual dollars and cents that are being lost on a daily basis by things being shut down, which we totally support things being shut down from a health perspective, obviously, but just trying to stay connected to our donors. So for the past 2 Fridays on Facebook, we did a Facebook takeover event. So we asked all of our institutions to develop a video that was a positive feel-good video, and they were really fun. A lot of people did some really fun, beautiful things with it, and they were uplifting and inspirational. And so that's one way that we're staying connected to donors and stewarding donors. The other way is by producing content that can help families at home while they're trying to homeschool their families. For example, we're working on a arts and culture at home booklet that will have an activity by every organization that we have that wants to participate, so that families can incorporate that at home. So we're staying on brand, and I think that's really important, but we're doing it in a sensitive way. We're talking about the recovery efforts. We're not, we've shifted the focus on how we talk about fundraising a bit, as opposed to, but what's interesting about this, though, is I think it is going to lend an opening, or offer an opening, to talk about operation money, annual fund money. I think donors are now going to really see why annual fund and operating funds are equally as important as endowment and restricted dollars and capital projects. I think we should all leverage this in some way about the importance of operational annual monies. So that's another thing that I'm seeing from a donor perspective.
Yeah, so I'll acknowledge a couple of things. Firstly, when it became really real, I think we can all sort of remember that day we sat down, we're like, this is a thing. I froze up. I'll be honest with you, and I think acknowledging that, this is really traumatic, not just for the people that we serve, but for us, our teams, the people around us, and really acknowledging that this is hard and that I don't have the answers I had to really, sit down and think about that. It took me a few days to start feeling as though we could get through this, and that we will get through this stronger than ever. And so I really, froze up. But I think that was really an important, that vulnerability was important to sort of get through before I could really feel strengthened by this. And I definitely, and I also want to acknowledge that, anything that we're doing, we're all of our nonprofits are in very different positions. And, although, my team has been able to do certain things, everybody will have the capacity, resources, and ability to do something different. And so I don't want to give sort of canned solutions to what we're doing and think that anybody else can sort of just do that. I know we're all in different situations. So what we did, so after I froze, was we sat down as a team. So we established as a team, and what we did was basically like, we know the world's different. We know we have to do something different here. And we looked at our organizational values. Everything was thrown out the windows. We had our 1,000-person lunch that we were just ramping up to full speed, that we were getting geared up for. We had tons of donor visits, blah, blah, blah. We had 2 cultivation events that we had to cancel. So like the plan was out the window. And so we had to really sit down, say, what can we do right now with the limitations that we have that reflect our core values, not just as an agency, but my team. When I first started my position, we sat down and created our own team values that are a reflection of our core values, but focused on fundraising. And we said, what can we do that reflects these, that highlights these values that we have? And we did a brainstorm. So we sat down as a team. This is before we weren't socially distanced at this point, unfortunately, but nonetheless, we sat down, we did a 90-minute brainstorm and started looking at our donor segments, broke those down, and talked about how do we want to reach out to these people and stay connected to these people, and came out with some loose plans that we're still really changing now. And so just to provide some examples, one of our values is partnership as a team. So we look at our donors as partners to our mission. And so with our foundation partners, we decided to really reach out to them to give them a real snapshot of the pain points that we're having, because we knew that those foundation partners were looking for solutions to this community-wide problem and looking to use their resources. So we reached out, talked about, this is what we're feeling. This is some things that we know other partners are feeling. Let us know if you want to have a discussion. And that really led us to be able to have really generative discussions with those partners that helped to strengthen our relationship with our foundation partners. And gave them what I felt was actually really information for them to make some really big decisions, not just right now, but over the next 12 to 18 months. So that's one example. We have, our major donors. We decided that we're going to do as much personal reach out as we can. And so one of my staff members who is really focused on working with our major donors, he has been on just a tear right now with telephone calls, personalized cards. He's making personalized videos to send to some of our donors. We're getting our board. We're really leaning hard into our board right now to make phone calls and send emails, just checking in, not asking for money, just saying, hey, this is what's going on. This is where we are right now. We want to keep you up to date. And yeah, if there's some softer asks, like we have a lot of sanitation and personal protective equipment needs. Yeah, these are the things that we need right now, just so we can continue serving the kiddos and families that we have right now, and really bringing them into the mix. That was a really big. My department, we also have a pretty robust volunteer program as well. And so we really shifted our volunteer program, which is much more traditionally hands-on, getting them to our campus, beautification days, program, volunteering, that kind of stuff. And we shifted gear to really focusing on in-kind donations and donation drives. And we are staying in regular contact with all of our volunteer groups. So we have a lot of faith-based volunteer groups. We have a lot of corporate volunteer groups. And we started what we call the staff meal train service. So we're 24/7 residential program. Well, that's our biggest program. And so our staff are really, struggling right now just as much as anyone is with maintaining stability with the program, maintaining this uncertainty. And so we started like a meal train program where people could go on Sign Up Genius and sponsor a meal for our staff just to give them a hot meal, just one less thing to worry about. And that's been really successful with a lot of our donors and volunteers as well. General comms, obviously social media, we're probably upped our social media presence or in terms of how often we post on Facebook and Twitter, by about 2 or 3 times. We've started really, trying to be as creative as possible to get more stories. So we've also started incentivizing our programs. We're calling them Monarch Stories because the monarch butterfly is our mascot. And we're incentivizing our programs to send us stories that we can use, whether with pictures, videos, testimonials from our clients, that we can just build a portfolio and an archive that we can use on a regular basis on social media, email updates to donors, and then and generally, that we can use, because we don't know how long this social distance is lasting, and so our ability. So we're still figuring it out. And every day I have conversations with my staff to figure out how we can do things better and more effectively. We don't have a perfect solution, but we've gotten some really good feedback so far. Unfortunately, there's been some, IU School of Philanthropy, I think, just put out some very preliminary information around the effectiveness of these, we're thinking of that were sort of more archaic touch points, many of us, that people are really responding. People are picking up their phone, gosh darn it, right now. So we've seen some of that firsthand.
Yeah, I would add a couple of things to that. One is talk about data. Micah mentioned kind of getting into your database and really evaluating your donors and telling the stories that come from your database. Now is a really good time to be working on your database if you haven't already had it in a good system. And data is only as good as it is in, data in, data out, to get really good data in there to be able to tell those stories and reach out to the donors in all the right ways. So I would encourage all organizations to work on their databases right now if they are in need of some brush up. And actually, quite frankly, I think it's been eye-opening probably for some organizations that didn't necessarily potentially have their data in a good place right now, to be able to quickly activate their donor base, respond to their donor base, put together these e-blasts telling them about their efforts related to coronavirus and COVID. So that's one thing I wanted to mention, is the concept of data Micah mentioned. And then I think from a marketing perspective, it's fabulous what's going on right now, because we are capturing all of these great stories. There's feel goods. The feel goods are actually rising above the yucky stories right now, which is nice, because we all have these feel good mission stories that we can tell. So I think the idea of relating mission moments during crisis is also really strong. I mean, it's always been strong for us to share those positive mission moments, but I think we have a really extra opportunity and responsibility, frankly, right now to showcase what we're doing from that perspective. So from a marketing perspective, capturing all these things that are happening on video, but don't forget the regular things you need to do, getting photo release forms and all of those kinds of things. So just a word there. I can speak to Mark's question if you want me to do that, Renee. I noticed there was.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Mark's question was related to what's going to happen to kind of the future of cultural institutions and arts institutions where people are used to going because of social distancing, and what kind of conversations are we having within the sector about that. He cited an article in there. Yeah, I think it goes without saying that there is going to be some trepidation by the public to go to places where there are a lot of people. I don't think that there's going to be a magic switch that says, okay, on July 1, everybody's back to normal. And I mean, that would be fabulous, but I just don't think that that's going to happen, unfortunately. And so the conversations that we're having now, which is interesting, about last week, we started shifting. We do these weekly town halls. In fact, we've got one today with our arts and cultural members. And I would say that last week, the conversation started shifting from complete and utter panic mode, although there is still that for sure, but to what happens on reopen. So just last week, we started doing a reopen committee. We launched a reopen committee. So what does that look like for everybody? So there are various concepts that are being discussed right now. Some are letting people in to a place, but not as many people as normal, so that they can have social distancing, or coming in with specific hours, entry hours, like you might go to a big city where there are entry hours that go in, that kind of a thing. Rearranging some of the exhibits and some of the things so that there are distancing, on purpose distancing happening in there. And then of course the cleaning protocols. I mean, that's a big thing. And the transparency of those cleaning protocols to the patrons that are coming in, really letting them know exactly what's happening from a cleaning perspective, making sure that those sanitizing and disinfecting protocols are happening throughout the day, and that people can visually see them. So that is something interesting. Mark asked about kind of the open air sort of experiences, the zoos and whatnot. And I do think that those will be more attractive to people in many ways, because they'll feel more comfortable, whether it's true or not from a science and health perspective. I don't know. I'm not Dr. Fauci, but I think the perception would be that in an open air environment, it would be a little bit easier with less things to touch. So that is interesting. It will probably shape the whole course of how exhibits are done in the interactive, which is interesting because the pendulum shifted from, the old school, and I used to work at our science center here, obviously the old school science center, not just here, but everywhere, was you kind of looked and you read a panel and you looked at a thing and you studied a specimen and you looked at a whatever. The new school science center kind of approach is very hands-on, where you touch everything. Like, that was the nature, to get immersive with all of these experiences. So it will be very interesting to see kind of the push-pull and the pendulum, how it swings back and forth for all of those. But I think the bottom line of that is I think social distancing measures will be put into place. Those are the kinds of conversations that are happening as this kind of reopen committee happens. I will say that, we got excited and we're like, let's do, a big grand opening party when the light switch goes back on. That was something we got excited about. Like, we'll do 24 hours, 48 hours, everything will be open straight. And then we're like, wait a second, bad idea. That will concern the public to be around everybody all at the same time for that, So it's just not going to unfortunately look like that. It'll be more gradual than that. And then adding staff back in, it's going to probably change the structure of how part-time and seasonal staff happens, because of the things like, cleaning and those other protocols and the amount of, bodies that we get in at a given time. So it's interesting, but it's still unfolding for sure.
Right. Okay. So we've just got a few more minutes left, but I want to get to some of these questions. Another question from Mark was regarding kind of your spring fundraising appeals or events. What are you all doing with a donor who was queued up in January for a very large ask in March?
So we're in the middle of a retirement campaign for our longtime CEO funding program for us. So this is very relevant to us. And what we've done, with this at least, it's not an infrastructural campaign, it's a programmatic campaign. We're not building a building. So I think it depends on what you're fundraising for, and what the risks are around that. And again, what your organization is facing from a financial perspective right now. But because of the scale and the scope of our campaign, we have decided to really, we want to lean hard into our major donors. And so this has provided another opportunity for us to connect with them and to move forward, but also, acknowledge the challenges that are being faced right now. And so there's one donor in particular that we were preparing for an ask in early March, and our CEO decided to give her a phone call to give her an update on how things are going at Maryhurst, and to say that, we feel as though we're still on track to doing all of the things that we want to do. We're working on this as a solution, and we still would love for you to support this campaign. And we did end up receiving that gift. I think donors, if you look at statistically, donors, the organizations that they're going to be really loyal to, they're going to continue funding. If you look at any economic downturn, generally fundraising can dip a little bit, but if you look at the most loyal donors, and if you look at the success of capital campaigns around economic downturn, it can take a little bit longer to finish campaigns, but most organizations beat their targets for these campaigns. So you can't stop fundraising, but you have to, if you have something to fundraise towards, that's great. And so I think this is an opportunity to really wrap your arms around your donors as opposed to taking a break, so to speak.
Okay. So another question that we have from Liz in regards to kind of events and along that line of how are you using technology to continue any of your planned events?
I mentioned this from that we're doing everything virtual right now. We're even considering, how and this is not for public consumption at all yet because it's not ready to go. But we're even considering, how would we do the cultural pass in a virtual way? Things that we normally do in person. How could we do that? But we have some really creative ways that our arts and cultural institutions are operating from a virtual perspective. I mentioned the Fraser, and they're all very on brand. The Fraser is also doing a thing where they are doing a historic time capsule related to coronavirus. So that's very much within the spirit of what they're about. The Louisville Youth Choir, for example, is doing what they're calling a youth distant sing. DISTANT and then SING. So every Sunday night they're putting out at 5:00 they're putting out people's kind of karaoke attempts in around a certain theme every week. So that's another fun use of technology. The Louisville Ballet put together their very own booklet of at-home ballet things that people could do. Udell Gardens is putting out these little mini videos every week, anything from how to make a fairy garden to other things. So there's lots of, it's a really creative time actually for our arts and cultural institutions to do this. Some of them were doing that kind of stuff already, and some of them hadn't done that. So some of it is new. What's interesting about it though also is you know, I think sometimes people are fearful of doing technological things or pushing out videos because they feel like they should be more polished or, you know, very professional, and they don't have a budget to do it. But honestly, a lot of this stuff is happening on iPhones right now, and it's authentic and it's coming across that way in a good way. So I think that that's been kind of a fun shift a little bit too, that it doesn't have to be so polished. And of course, lots and lots of Zoom.
Yes, I think we're all using lots and lots of Zoom today. I actually have a 10:45 also on Zoom, so yeah, I'll be here the rest of the day. Yeah. So we've got 2 questions related to social media. One is for Micah and one is for Robin. So Micah, if you want to speak to this question, you've increased social media. What about emails to donors? How often are you sending those? And Robin, someone would like you to explain a Facebook takeover. So Micah, we can start with you.
Sure. So we were really cautious about sending, you know, like just a mass email, like to all of our email. You know, we have an email list of thousands of names that we usually it's our newsletter email list for the most part. So what we did, so yes, we've increased social media engagement. And what we did with our emails was we didn't want to have a knee-jerk email to just say, we didn't have anything to ask of people necessarily right away. We needed to figure things out. And so what we did with our planning, when we sat down and did a brainstorm, we figured out, well, we want to do some general communications to our support base, generally speaking. And so we laid out what we wanted to do is bi-weekly update emails, but to have some really rich content. So we've not really upped. I guess it has increased. We have monthly e-newsletters that we use this list for. So we've doubled the number of emails that we're sending. But we really wanted to have rich content and very focused requests from those people. That wasn't just a general solicitation for funding. Because I know and you know that we're getting a lot of those emails that are just saying, help us, we need help right now. Here's the link to our donation button, which is not necessarily a bad thing to be doing, but we wanted to make sure that it was, you know, on brand with how we like to communicate. And so what we decided to do, we did a video of our CEO, who's a public figure that people recognize, especially people that are on our email list for the most part. And we did a video sort of update via email from her as our kickoff email, and we followed that up with just 3 simple things that people can do to get involved right now. We spun it a little bit. It wasn't just about give us things. We're hiring right now. We have a desperate need for human resource right now, and so we really highlighted the need that, hey, we're still continuing our programs. We have this population that we have to continue serving. Why don't you become a part of that? And even though we didn't necessarily get a lot of people hired from that, people really appreciated our feedback that we got from that we still had a need in terms of human capital. But we wanted to be careful, and somebody mentioned already, like having a focused communications plan in this. So our new motto is we're all in this together, kind of thing. And so everything that we're doing right now is about we, not about how you can help us. It's about how we're in this together as a group of partners to support the most vulnerable kids in our community. And so we really tried to establish sort of offshoot of our brand, as it were, but we that sort of played into our email. But we haven't really we're doing a lot of email, but much more targeted, personalized email to our corporate volunteer groups, our major donors. We've been communicating with our board. A lot of times we forget to update our board. We're doing weekly Monday afternoon board emails. I mean, they're our most important donors. And we've gotten a ton of support. They're forwarding their emails to people to support us in various ways. And so we've been trying to be as intentional as possible with the way that we're emailing and communicating with people.
Okay, great. Robin, do you want to talk about a Facebook takeover and what that is, what it looks like?
Sure. Yeah, it's not necessarily a technical Facebook, event that they put out, or a special kind of technology within Facebook. That's just kind of what we called it, and it was a very intentional day where we collected all of these videos from our partners, our member organizations. And every 15 minutes I posted on Facebook what those videos were, from 10 o'clock in the morning till 8 o'clock that night, the first week that we did it. The second week I did it from 10 to 5, but we announced it in advance, changed up our Facebook profile picture, changed up our Facebook event, created a Facebook event, changed the Facebook cover to say that so we teased it out saying we were having this takeover on Friday, where all day long they were going to see these uplifting and inspirational videos. For every video that we put out and every post that we put out, we also added 3 hashtags, arts and culture, INKY, Indiana, Kentucky, team Kentucky, Governor Beshear's hashtag, as well as Lift Up Lou, our local hashtag that the mayor's been using, and the website that they've been using. And then, so every one of those had that in there. And we also did, simultaneously, we posted on Instagram. So all day long, we just had posts all day. In advance of that, we asked every single one of our board members to share it, as they saw it all throughout the day, as well as the organizations that we were posting and tagging in there. So it was just a way to kind of have an online virtual event, and made it sound like a, more of a kind of a blitz event, if you will. Kind of like a Facebook marathon.
Well, that sounds great. Okay, well, I think that handles all of the questions that we had in the chat box. Looks like it. And we are at 9:05, so we are going to go ahead and wrap things up. I want to thank you both for participating. I want to thank everybody on the call who joined us. This was, like we said, our first virtual meeting. So with that, we'll have Leah say a few things to finish up.
Thank you very much. And thank you to Micah and Robin for joining us today. One thing that we do is present these speakers with FREML mugs. We will get that to you at a later date, but you will get them, I promise. And just want to say thank you to everyone for joining us today. We are planning on meeting again virtually in May. The subject matter is TBD right now, but I would encourage everyone who is on the meeting today to please send feedback about today's meeting. Was there something that you really enjoyed? Was there a challenge that you'd like for us to know about? Please share any sort of feedback with us so we can make the next one better. Also, if you have more questions, either for FREML or for our speakers, you can send those to us through our Facebook page or through the contact us portion of the FREML website. As far as any other updates, I don't really have any. As I said, we are going to meet again in May. I believe the date is May 12th. And we will be sending out a recording of this virtual meeting for our members. So please look for that email. And thank you again so much, and I hope everyone enjoys their Tuesday.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you for having me.
Good luck with
Thank
everything.
you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.